Hello, my name is Paul Jones, author of Concerning a Nation and several videos on Bible prophecy. Why talk about Russia? Well, the first answer is that in my diagram of the timelines which affect Israel, I show the old Soviet Union. And pre-Soviet Russia figures in the story of the birth of Israel, as I've outlined in my book. God called the Aliyah in the late 19th century. The vast majority of the Jews of the world lived in Russia or Eastern Europe, and the journey for them would have been easy, since it was literally just a question of going south. A few did go to the Holy Land, but despite numerous warnings, increasingly violent persecutions, a false revolution in 1905 and a real one in 1917, the Jews went everywhere except Palestine or stayed to help build a godless communist paradise. The Soviet Union was created legally in December 1922 and was legally abolished after decades of horror and misery in December 1991. This was exactly 25,200 days from its legal inception, 70 prophetic Bible years. During this time, the Jews were locked in. God was clearly saying to them, "You won't leave, you can't leave." Now, in parallel to this, the Aliyah to the Holy Land was protected by the British Empire first, which later reneged on her mission by preventing the Jews from returning to Palestine. She paid a heavy price. Bankrupted by World War II, India was the first loss in 1947, and the rest of the empire soon followed. And then the United States of America was the giant protector of Israel. Again, she claimed to be a supporter of Israel, but constantly imposed peace plans which divided the land. See my video about 7 presidents and 7 blasphemies. America's license to protect Israel expired, as it were, in May 2017. The Soviet Union, which at first recognised Israel in 1948, later became an implacable enemy. She armed and supported the Arab nations which were bent upon destroying Israel. No wonder that rash spirits tried to haul the Soviets into Bible prophecy. But the demise of the Soviet Union has done nothing to prevent this flood of misinterpretations, even though Russia's President Putin is a known supporter of Israel. Although I admit that when you sup with a man like Putin, you use a spoon as long as a vaulting pole. With the end of the Soviet imprisonment, many Jews emigrated, some to America, many to Israel. And a fifth of Israeli inhabitants now speak Russian. Trade and defence links are many and varied. There are conflicts as well as agreements. Russia and Israel would both like to see Iran removed from Syria, incidentally. Israel has now come of age. She has, as it were, gone out into the nations. A third period of 70 years during which she makes her precarious path through the thorny thickets of regional and global frictions. Most of these nations are duplicitous, dangerous and unstable. Israel will need all the help she can get from God, while daily becoming more and more morally depraved. Russia has lost millions of Jews, which perhaps explains her economic and intellectual underperformance. She now buys defence equipment from Israel. Meanwhile, President Biden, the narcoleptic dotard tenuously in charge of America, alienates Israel and her new Gulf allies as he tries to keep the globalist order from falling apart. Most of the world's Jews of the diaspora now live in North America. What force will need to be unleashed by God to send them back? The usual: war, persecution and economic breakdown. The second answer is that the hordes of false prophecy writers in America have roped modern Russia into a misunderstanding of one particular prophecy. In Ezekiel 38, there is a reference to an attack on Israel made by Gog of the land of Magog. Gog is chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. Persia, Cush and Put are with them. The nations in this war are generally identified as being Russia, Libya, Turkey and Iran. Iran or Persia is the least controversial of these identifications. Others are often challenged. Why, if they represent states in the modern age, does the Bible not use their real name? For decades, this prophecy has been wheeled out at times of international strife. Each crisis is different, and each time we are told that it fits perfectly. When the Soviet Union was meddling in the Middle East, when Colonel Gaddafi of Libya was engaged in his lunatic antics, and of course we all knew in the 50s and 60s that communism was the red horse of revelation and so forth. All nonsense, as I've pointed out before, but nobody learns the lesson of caution. Libya today, incidentally, is an anarchic failed state, and Israel sides with Russia against Turkey, the latter supporting the official Libyan government. Libya isn't going to attack anyone except herself for a while. So what is happening now that is supposedly causing this passage to become pertinent? Well, nothing really. To be sure, as I've made clear, there will be huge problems with Iran in the Gulf region, but they have no connection to the war of Gog and Magog. The Battle of Gog and Magog is also mentioned in Revelation 20 and is quite clearly said to take place after the millennium, at a time when Satan has been re-released to torment the nations for one last time. What is even more bewildering is that millennium is described in Ezekiel 37. The two chapters 37 and 38, the prophecy in the Valley of Bones, incontrovertibly follow on from each other. Israel in this passage is a land of unwalled villages dwelling securely, rather a far cry from the high-tech siege state of modern Israel. And while we're on the subject of technology, the initial attack of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel 38 is made by traditional armies on horses with shields, bucklers and armour. As I've stated elsewhere, there is no modern technology in Bible prophecy. Of course, the world can change and no nation can be trusted to do anything except look out for itself. But for the moment, this is the picture. The world, and especially the Middle East, is a maelstrom of conflicting cross-currents of hatreds and alliances. There is nothing wrong with Israel being cautious about new friendships in a treacherous world. And history tells us that it is perfectly possible for nations who trade with each other to go to war. But there's no doubt, having said that the situation is far different today. At the moment, it seems far more likely that Israel will be the attacker and Persia the attacked, with no guarantee that the US will not be dragged into the mess. And finally, as far as Holy Russia is concerned, she does not have any great messianic significance. The Orthodox Church, so different from the Catholic Church yet so similar in her blasphemous idolatry, iconography and rituals, is simply another department of the modern Laodicean Church in which anything goes. Thank you for watching and God bless you all. Please read my book Concerning a Nation, published by Lulu. Thank you again.